Okay, kids, lean in close, because I am about to tell you something that is going to blow your mind completely. You know how sometimes you're playing outside, and you find a little hole in the ground, and you poke a stick into it, and the stick just keeps going and going and going, way deeper than you expected, and you get that funny feeling in your stomach, like maybe the hole is bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside? Now imagine that feeling, but a million times bigger. Imagine that instead of a little hole in the ground, it is a cave, and instead of a stick, it is an entire city. A whole city, with skyscrapers and clouds and jungle trees and rivers and beaches, all of it fitting inside one single cave underground. A real cave, on our real planet, right here on Earth. That cave exists, and this is the story of how it was found. It all started with a rainstorm, not a special rainstorm, not a magical rainstorm from a fairy tale, just a regular, very wet, very tropical rainstorm in the jungle of Vietnam, a country in Southeast Asia where the rain, when it comes, really means business. It comes down in thick curtains that soak you to the bones in about 30 seconds flat, and if you are standing in the jungle when it starts, your only option is to run. That is exactly what a man named Ho Khan was doing one afternoon in the early 1990s. Ho Khan, say it like Ho Khan, was a farmer and a forest worker who had spent his whole life in the jungles of the Phong Nha region of central Vietnam. He knew these jungles the way you know your own bedroom. He knew which trees were which paths went where, which hills had good shelter, and which ones did not. He was not lost. He was just very, very wet. He ran toward the nearest cliff face he could see through the trees, pushing wet branches out of his face, his feet squelching in the muddy jungle floor, looking for anything, a rock overhang, a ledge, anything, that would get him out of the downpour for a few minutes. And then he saw it, right there in the cliff face, half hidden behind a curtain of hanging jungle plants, was a hole. Not a small hole, a big hole, a really, really big hole, big enough for a grown man to walk straight into without ducking his head. And coming out of that hole, this is the part that made Ho Khan stop running and just stand there in the rain staring, was wind. A real, strong, steady wind, blowing right out of the cave like the mountain was breathing. And from somewhere deep inside, way down in the darkness, he could hear something else, the sound of a river, a real underground river, flowing somewhere far below in the dark. Ho Khan stood at the entrance of that cave and peered into the blackness beyond it. He could not see anything, just darkness, deep and total. The kind of darkness that does not let your eyes adjust no matter how long you wait. The wind kept blowing, the river kept murmuring, and Ho Khan, being a very sensible and practical man who did not have a torch or a rope or any of the equipment you would want before walking into a dark unknown hole in a cliff face in the middle of the jungle, made the completely reasonable decision to leave it alone. He went home. He told his family and friends about the cave with the wind and the river. They nodded and said that sounded interesting. And then, because people have crops to tend and food to find and lives to live, everyone more or less moved on. The cave sat in the cliff face, breathing its steady wind into the jungle, keeping its secrets in the dark. Now here's the part of the story that is a little bit funny, and a little bit amazing at the same time. Ho Khan could not find the cave again. He knew roughly where it was. He had a general idea of which part of the forest, which cliff face, which direction from the path. But the jungle of Phong Nha is incredibly dense and incredibly green and incredibly good at hiding things. The vines and ferns and mosses grow over rock faces so quickly in the hot, wet Vietnamese climate that an opening you saw clearly one month can be completely invisible the next. And so the largest cave on Earth sat there, hidden behind a wall of jungle plants, completely unknown to science, completely unexplored, patiently waiting. For more than 15 years, it waited. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a husband and wife team of cave explorers from Britain were getting very interested in Vietnam. Their names were Howard and Deb Limbert, and they were part of an organization called the British Cave Research Association, which is exactly what it sounds like. A group of people who are absolutely passionate about caves and spend their holidays crawling through them with headlamps and ropes, which tells you a lot about what kind of people they are. Wonderful people. Slightly unusual people. People who think that the most exciting place you can possibly be is underground, in the dark, not knowing what is around the next corner. Howard and Deb had first come to Vietnam in 1990, and they had already explored and documented hundreds of caves in the Phong Nha region. They knew the area was extraordinary. The limestone karst geology of central Vietnam was producing cave after cave of remarkable size and beauty. Crystal clear underground rivers, enormous chambers, extraordinary cave formations hanging from ceilings like stone chandeliers. But Howard kept hearing stories from local people about one particular cave. A cave with an entrance so large you could walk right in. A cave with a wind blowing out of it strong enough to feel. A cave with a river inside it that you could hear from outside. Every time Howard asked where this cave was, the answers were slightly different. This direction, that hill, maybe an hour walk from this village, maybe 2 hours. Nobody could say exactly, but the stories kept coming, consistently describing the same features: the big entrance, the wind, the river. Howard was certain the cave was real. He was equally certain it was significant. He just had no idea quite how significant. Then, in 2008, something wonderful happened. Ho Khan, the very same farmer who had found the cave during that rainstorm 15 years earlier, found it again. He had been searching for it, returning to the forest again and again over the years, trying to relocate the cliff face and the hidden entrance. And one day, pushing through the jungle in just the right direction, he found himself standing in front of that familiar wall of hanging vegetation with the familiar wind blowing against his face. He went straight to Howard Limbert, and Howard Limbert immediately started packing his caving gear. On April 10, 2009, Howard Limbert led a team of British cavers into Sun Dung Cave for the first time. Ho Khan led them through the jungle to the entrance. They stepped inside, and the cave began to reveal itself. At first, the passage was large but not extraordinary, big enough to walk through comfortably, the ceiling high above their headlamps, the floor uneven with ancient rock and mud. The team moved carefully, measuring and photographing as they went, their breath misting in the cool cave air. The underground wind pushed gently against their backs. The sound of the river grew louder as they descended, and then the passage opened up. Kids, I want you to imagine the biggest room you have ever been in. Maybe a sports stadium. Maybe a massive shopping center. Maybe the biggest hall you have ever seen. Now imagine that room is underground, carved into solid rock, and it is so enormous that your headlamp, even the very best, very brightest headlamp, cannot reach the ceiling above you or the walls beside you. Imagine standing in a space so large that you genuinely cannot tell how big it is, because the darkness swallows your light before it can reach the edges. That is what happened to Howard Limbert and his team when Sun Dung opened up around them. The ceiling soared so high above their heads that they could not see it. The walls were so far apart they could barely make out the opposite side. The floor stretched ahead of them as a landscape in itself. Enormous boulders the size of houses, smooth sandy beaches along the edges of a crystal-clear underground river, deep pools of still water reflecting their headlamps like mirrors. They were not in a cave anymore. They were in a world. They walked and walked and walked, and the cave did not get smaller. It got bigger. The measurements that scientists took during this and subsequent expeditions told a story that even now, knowing all the numbers, is hard to fully believe. Sun Dung's main passage stretches for roughly 5 kilometers. That is longer than 50 football fields placed end to end. In the biggest sections, it is 200 meters wide. That is wider than 2 football fields placed side by side. And it is 150 meters tall. That is taller than a 40-story skyscraper, with room for the clouds that float near the top. Scientists calculated the total volume of the cave at approximately 38.5 million cubic meters. That is enough space to fit an entire New York City block of 40-story buildings inside a single cave, with room above the rooftops for clouds to form. The stalagmites, those pointy rock formations that grow upward from cave floors, inside Sun Dung reach heights of over 70 meters. 70 meters! That is taller than most buildings you have ever walked past on the street. They have been growing, one tiny layer of calcium at a time, for hundreds of thousands of years, drip by patient drip, building themselves up in the darkness over a time span, so long it makes your brain feel slightly swimmy if you think about it too hard. The cave has its own river, running cold and clear along the floor. It has beaches of fine white sand along the river's banks, Real beaches, underground, where you could theoretically sit and watch the water go by in total darkness 100 meters below the surface of the earth. It has cave pearls, perfectly smooth, perfectly round balls of calcium carbonate sitting in shallow pools, in sizes and perfection that experienced cave scientists say they have never seen anywhere else in the world. And then there is the life, because Sun Dong is not empty. It is very much alive. The jungle ecosystems growing beneath the dolines are full of creatures adapted to this strange in-between world. Not quite the outdoor jungle, not quite the dark cave interior. Rare cave fish swim in the underground river. Cave spiders and cave crickets live on the walls and sections, where no light reaches at all. Bacteria and microscopic organisms coat the cave surfaces in the deepest sections, making their living from the minerals in the rock itself. The same way microbes live around deep-sea volcanic vents, needing no sunlight whatsoever. And in the Doline jungles, monkeys and birds and insects that belong to the surface world come down through the light shafts and make themselves at home in this extraordinary underground clearing, creating an ecosystem that exists nowhere else on Earth and that scientists are still only beginning to understand. Sun Dong was officially declared the world's largest cave in 2009, when the initial data from the British expedition was published and compared against all previously known cave systems. It beat the previous record holder, Deer Cave in Malaysia, by a margin that left the scientific community somewhat stunned, because Sun Dong was not just a little bigger than Deer Cave. It was dramatically, overwhelmingly bigger. In the cave exploration world, where records tend to shift by modest margins, Sun Dong was a completely different category of thing. The cave was open to a small number of visitors in 2013, and today a limited number of adventurous tourists can join guided expeditions into Sun Dong each year. A journey that takes 4 days, involves camping inside the cave, climbing the Great Wall with ropes, wading through the underground river, and sleeping on the underground beaches. The number of visitors is kept deliberately small to protect the extraordinary ecosystems inside. The waiting list is long. The experience, by every account of everyone who has done it, is unlike anything else on Earth. And Ho Khan, the farmer who found the entrance, lost it, and then found it again after 15 years of searching. He became one of the most celebrated people in Vietnamese cave exploration. He works as a guide now, leading expeditions through the jungle to the cave entrance and into the darkness beyond, showing people the place he stumbled upon in the rain all those years ago when he was just trying to stay dry. He has said in interviews that he still feels a sense of wonder every single time he walks into Sun Dong, that no matter how many times he has been inside, the moment the passage opens up into that vast, cloud-filled, jungle-growing, river-running underground world, he feels the same thing he felt the very first time. The feeling that the world is bigger and stranger and more generous with its wonders than any of us have any right to expect. And you know what, kids? He is absolutely right. The largest cave on Earth was hiding in a jungle in Vietnam, behind a curtain of leaves, breathing its steady wind into the rain, keeping its clouds and its rivers and its underground jungles all to itself for millions of years, waiting for a rainstorm and a wet farmer and a very persistent pair of British cave explorers to finally bring it into the light. Just imagine what else might still be out there, waiting for someone curious enough to look.